everybody, and welcome to Episode 6 of the AutoGuide Show. I am Jodi, this is Sami,
Hello.
And this week we have a very special guest. We are Skyping in Mr. Craig Cole from Detroit.
Hi guys, how are you?
We're doing really good. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a long drive through Skype, but I'm glad to be here.
Everyone is like, where's the nerd with glasses? Give us Craig. So here you are, everyone. Here's Craig. And this week we're going to be talking about the Cadillac XT4, the Toyota Supra, which is excellent, the Nissan GTR, and the Nissan Altima. A new episode of the AutoGuide Show drops every other Friday on YouTube or your favorite podcast provider. And make sure to like and subscribe and comment. It makes it easier for people to see our podcast, and therefore you will never miss an episode. If you have any questions for us, email us at tips@AutoGuide.com. And unfortunately, we don't have any user questions this week, but I made one up.
Okay.
And the question for everyone is, if you had $40,000 to spend on a new car, what would it be?
That's a really good question because there's a lot of cars that can slide in around $40,000, and I think there's some pretty good ones too. I have my choice. Do you guys know what you've decided yet?
I think I know what I'm gonna pick.
Okay, so I'll go first.
I think I'm morning, but I got one. I think it's pretty good.
I'm gonna pick the brand new Genesis G70 Sport with the manual transmission and the rear-wheel drive, which I think is the perfect choice for me. It's a nice, sporty vehicle. You know how much I love sports sedans. I think they're the best combination of like engagement and
practicality.
Like practicality and luxury as well. And I've been really impressed with the new G70, even with the 2-liter turbo. And so that's the one that I would pick. It also has a limited slip differential, so you can have some fun with it as well.
That's a really good pick. I assumed you would have picked something like sportier.
What, you're saying the G70 isn't sporty?
No, but I mean like, because you have an 86 right now, or an FRS, and so I assumed you would have gone like, Miata RF or something.
Oh no, I think the value for the Miata RF just isn't there. I mean, I think that's way too much money for a vehicle like that.
Fair enough.
And do you really need a hardtop in a Miata? I mean,
yeah.
I
agree.
would. I don't like the sun.
I don't like the. I think I agree with you, Craig. The RF is actually the worst parts of the Miata. You like lose half the whole fun of being in a convertible.
But what if you always wanted a Miata but don't like convertibles like me?
Then why did you always want a Miata?
Because of the driving dynamics. I'm not crazy. I think 50% of all Miatas sold are RFs, so I'm not crazy.
Yeah, it is a very high percentage for sure.
What's your answer, Craig?
So I was vacillating a little. I think a Camaro SS is really good, and I think that's less than 40 grand, or like a Mustang GT, something like that. But I went with a little bit of a different choice. I picked the BMW 230i Coupe, which you can get with the M Sport design package, and with, I think, about one option, which is the Estoril Blue. It's that beautiful sort of lightish, that medium blue kind of sparkly color. That's an extra upcharge, of course. I think it's like $600 or something. But out the door, it's like 41 grand and change. So a little past the $40,000 price cap, but I think I could, borrow from friends the extra.
We're allowed to go over the $40,000 price point here? What is this? What is this? What's going on here?
No,
Nobody told me that.
If he doesn't pick the paint, then it'll be fine. So it's okay. I'll let it slide. It's funny because when I was thinking about my answer to this question, the M240i was kind of against the one I actually picked, which is the Audi S3.
Oh, you and the S3.
Because listen, so like if I didn't have old parents who couldn't crawl into a coupe, then I would have picked the BMW because it has a manual, it has rear drive. But for me, I just need the added practicality. I need 4 doors and like usable back seats. So that's the car I ended up going with. But the M240i was my second choice.
Okay,
Does the M240i hit the $40,000 price cap?
Yeah, Jodi. Did you do your research too?
It's actually a little bit more expensive.
Okay. Actually, Craig, I'll be honest. The first car I thought about was a 2 Series, and I think that actually bodes really well for BMW. The fact that all of us like immediately gravitated to that. But I think you're right. I would have preferred the 6-cylinder instead of the 4-cylinder. And then, in addition to that, it's a great handling car. It's a really good driver's car, but I don't know if it's exactly worth $40,000. That's a lot of money, and the materials, in my opinion, just aren't quite there. It's still like the lower rung of the BMW like lineup. So that's why I
mean,
chose
it's definitely
the
not a luxury car per se, right? Like to your point, Sammy, the interior isn't that great, but I drove the M240i a year or two ago, and it was really enjoyable. And I know some of that magic is trickled down to the base version, you know?
Yeah, and I do love that. And that's the reason why I went with the S3. Like another reason was because it's luxurious inside. It just feels like any other Audi. It doesn't feel like a cheaper version.
You mean it feels like every other Volkswagen, right?
That's not true.
It does. It's the same platform, the same engine as like a Golf R.
But it has all of the best interior bits. It has that digital dashboard. Come on.
Yeah, the virtual cockpit is pretty cool. You guys chose some pretty small
What color
cars,
would
to
you
be
get,
honest.
Jody?
I don't need-
know
I
you
don't need a
tested
big
one of those
car.
cars a while back, and it was like bright yellow. Is that the color you'd get?
Yeah, it would be exactly that spec. So it would be the bright yellow with those same wheels. So a funny story, I was about to buy this car, and it turns out I couldn't afford the insurance because it is so expensive.
Wow.
Yeah, so I ended up
That's where
not
they
buying
get
that
ya.
car.
Yeesh.
Anyway, thanks for answering my question. And once again, if any of our viewers or listeners want to ask us any questions, email us at tips@AutoGuide.com, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube video or on the post on AutoGuide.com when it's published. And what's next, Sammy?
Well, we've got some news stories. Here's one that you guys were more interested in talking about than I was. So let's see if we can get this off the slate here. Cadillac, the American luxury automaker, is moving their headquarters from New York back to Detroit. Do you guys have something important to say about this? Because I don't. I don't care.
Why don't you care?
I don't think it makes any difference where their HQ is. Even other automakers have HQs around the world. I think even Infiniti has an HQ in
Hong Kong.
Yeah. Has that changed the dynamic of the brand in any significant way?
I agree with you, Sammy, and I also disagree. Like, I don't think just having your headquarters in a different city is going to do anything to practically change a company's corporate culture. So in that respect, I think it's something of a non-starter, really. But also, it's kind of an I told you so, right? Like, I think a lot of people are like, why are you moving to New York? Everything else GM does is in Detroit. Just save the money and stay here, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I think this is more of a cost-cutting measure than anything else. I think if they want to change the culture, they have to hire younger people and more forward-thinking people.
And I think that's what they've done while they were in New York. I feel like that's what they've done.
Yeah, they went out of their way to hire a lot of young people from New York, and the whole reason they worked there in the first place was because they have their HQ in Manhattan. It's fancy, and they wanted to align themselves with fancier brands, and that was the place you can do it. And now that they're moving back to Detroit, I don't know if people are going to see Cadillac as a high-end luxury brand anymore. Or
and
again,
I think they'll be able to entice those folks from New York back to the Midwest with like way cheaper rent, right? Because like, what does an apartment cost in Manhattan versus Milford or Warren or something, right?
You guys can't get like good ramen in Detroit or
Wow,
like good tacos. Like the food in Detroit is just not going to be the
Producer
same.
Ben is scowling at you, Jody.
Yeah,
He just made a
actually,
face
the food in
off
Detroit's
camera
not
here.
that bad at
He's
all.
not-
Detroit's
please.
having a major comeback right now. I will say that, and I actually love Detroit as much as that sounded really shady.
I don't know. I don't think it makes a huge difference. I think it is very funny to say that they need to change their corporate culture. So they went to New York, and now they're coming back. And then not only that, if it's to save money, wasn't one of the issues with General Motors' luxury arm is that they never felt quite luxurious enough, and they sometimes felt like they were saving money by using General parts from Chevrolet and Buick. And now they're just going back, and it feels like the same. They're not changing the corporate culture at all. They're like, we're back to sharing things.
Yeah, but like, how long have
But they have
been
been
in
all
New
along,
York?
right? I mean, you get the same switchgear and stuff. And
How much?
what?
How long have they been in New York?
I think it's been just about 4 years or a
Yeah,
little bit
it
less
hasn't
than 4
been
years.
a lot of time. And I think if they were going to make this move, because this was one of Johann's big things, was that
Yeah.
he wanted to move to New York. And now that he's out of the picture, they're like, okay, bye. Everything that Johan did, let's just reverse it.
Isn't it hilarious though? Like he did the same exact thing at Infiniti. He changed the brand's nomenclature. He moved the headquarters, and then he got ousted. Then he goes to Cadillac. He changes the nomenclature. He moves the headquarters. Is he going to go to a third automaker and do the same thing? I wonder.
Yeah, who should it be?
Who
I
should
wonder.
it be? Who has the worst nomenclature right now? Mercedes.
That's a good question for the audience. Like, where's Johan going to go next?
That's true. I would love to hear what the audience thinks about that. Just moving on, we have some good news from Toyota. They're finally going to add Android Auto to their awful, N-Tune system?
Right.
Oh, it's so terrible.
But Android Auto is not. Android Auto is pretty handy. It's helpful.
Oh, it's great.
It's going to be a huge upgrade over the N-Tune system, and I think that's pretty good. And we had that reaction when they also included Apple CarPlay to some of their cars just recently. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see which car comes with Android Auto first. I think it should be one of their mass market ones, like the RAV4.
Should be like a Corolla hatch or something.
Corolla.
Yeah.
I don't know if many people are buying the Corolla hatch. I feel like the RAV4 will really showcase just how good their infotainment system has become with the addition of Android Auto.
Yeah, and it makes sense for it to be in the RAV4 because that's their next big product launch, right? Mm-hmm. So the timing is right.
What's interesting is the decision itself is I mean, we are always saying, why don't you include Android Auto and before this Apple CarPlay? And it turned out that, I mean, at least from Toyota's point of view, they were looking for like security and privacy measures. Apparently, when it comes to using these infotainment systems, the automaker has to agree to send a little bit of some information about the driver and their habits or their connected devices back to either Apple or Google. So in order to work out a deal with them to use each other's systems, that's what it happens. So apparently, Toyota and Google have worked something out which is agreeable for Toyota to say that we're, with confidence, we think our
That's crazy, because Google doesn't have enough information about us all already, right?
Well, actually, that brings up. I mean, this is something that we didn't have in the lineup, but Amazon has introduced this Alexa in the Alexa Auto, which is this little device with 8 microphones in it that you put in your dashboard, on your dashboard
to basically spy on you when you're driving and serve you like ads based on where you are, what you want to eat. You can tell it. The cool thing is that it integrates with if you have like the home version of that, and you can use it to like turn on your lights or like turn on your air conditioning before you get home, stuff like that.
Right.
But
so anyone who thought like their car was like the last safe spot for your information and for you to have some private thoughts to yourself, definitely not.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
But I say, like, for Toyota, thank goodness they're finally offering these features, because I was on the Avalon launch a couple months ago, the new Avalon, and Ben Sanders, video producer, and I were driving around, and we wanted to deviate from the route that was programmed into the nav system, into the, N-Tune 3.0, I think. And we were poking around trying to cancel the destination. We couldn't figure it out. We're like, okay, we got to get this stopped. So we pull over, we stop the car. We couldn't figure out how to cancel the route, both of us. We spent 15 minutes and could not cancel the navigation system. It was insane. So bring on Apple CarPlay, bring on Android Auto, please.
yeah, this is going to make their stuff a lot more user-friendly, because if N-Tune, the reason why we're so happy about this is because N-Tune was just not very good as an infotainment system. Like, it's not very user-friendly. Like, you run into problems like that all the time where doing the simplest task just takes forever.
Which is really funny, because I always liked Toyota's interior design around the infotainment, because they always had these ginormous buttons. It looked like the remote controls you would give your like grandparents. They're huge buttons. I mean, do you remember this? Like, especially in like the Corolla or something, massive buttons. And I always found that it was very funny that these buttons are surrounding an infotainment system that was really confusing to use.
Well, it's funny because in the new Camry, the buttons are so small. So they went completely opposite of the big button thing. And they were so small that you can barely push them when you drive, which is annoying. So anyway, I'm happy that Toyota is having Android Auto. I have no complaints about that. So that's good. Did we want to start talking about cars, or did you want to do the other two news things?
Well, you know what? There's one more piece that I want to talk about. It was a feature that a list that you wrote.
Yes.
A list that is getting considerably shorter each year. This is about vehicles that are only available with manual transmissions. And this took us actually a good day to come up with these vehicles. And we had to include trim levels and stuff like that. So some of the cars that, are not surprising, things like the Shelby GT350, the BRZ TS from Subaru, and the new upcoming Veloster N.
Yes.
But there are some other vehicles on there that it is interesting to see that they're still only being offered with a manual transmission. The Honda Civic Si. I thought by now, especially with the rest of its competitors offering automatic transmissions, like say the Golf GTI. And the Subaru WRX, I thought for sure the Civic Si should be given an automatic transmission.
Yeah, especially because the Type R is manual only. You think that if people didn't want that, then a Civic Si with an automatic might be a good option. But if you wanted an automatic, wasn't too bad.
Which is fine. Enthusiasts are gonna shift their gears.
And what's kind of funny, I noticed like 2 of the cars on the list are versions of the Mustang and 2 are versions of the Civic, right?
I know. So it really says a lot about who are going to be the last flag bearers of manual cars.
So you're saying we got to remove 2 of those cards from the list? It's really just 5 only manual.
Well, there's two Subarus, 2 Hondas, 2 Fords, and 1 Hyundai. Which is like a really unlikely list, it seems like.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's funny because the last time we did a list like this was in 2015, and there were 10 cars.
Well, that's because I remember other vehicles being on the list, like maybe the Fiat 500 Abarth, I think, was on that list, and now it comes with an auto. It has an automatic.
Same thing with the Golf R.
Right.
There was a period of time where you could only get the Golf R with a manual, but now you can get the that 7-speed DCT. Stuff like, the Viper, which you can't buy anymore, the 911R, which you can't buy anymore either. What else was on that list before? Focus RS, the ST, and the Fiesta ST.
Which have all been canned.
They've all been discontinued. The Cayman GT4 used to be manual only, and for the next one, we're not sure if it'll have manual.
I'm thinking it probably won't be that way because I think it'll be offered with a PDK. First of all, PDKs are very quick and
they're good,
responsive.
Yeah.
But like even Porsche's latest purist car, which is the Carrera T, is offered with an automatic transmission. So I think that it's likely that the Cayman will also be put that way.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting in another 2 years when we revisit this if that list is going to be even smaller.
None.
None will be left.
Yes. Here's a used car listing of all of your favorite old cars.
Yes, that's what it's going to be, right? Used cars.
Or it'll be like cars we wished had manual transmission, and it'll just be like all of them.
I want a Honda Odyssey with a manual on the column.
Yeah, why not? Remember when Porsche offered the Cayenne with a manual?
Do I remember? No, I don't remember. I can't imagine that being a thing.
That was a thing back then. I think this was like the first gen one.
Weird.
Yeah.
I feel like trucks will.
You could get an X5 with a manual too. I think it was the first gen as well.
But not anymore, right?
Oh yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's weird. It's like automakers are going automatic. Obviously, they're more efficient, right? That used to not be the case. Manuals were always more economical. But new automatics are generally more fuel efficient. They're also faster to change gears. And automakers are chasing like that last couple tenths of a second, 0 to 60, or a couple miles an hour in the quarter mile, right?
Yeah, or more MPGs.
Yeah.
But they're giving up so much enjoyment in the process. Like, you don't have to be the fastest one there to have a good time, right?
Right.
It's all about driver enjoyment, which, like, to what we were talking about earlier, the Miata is so much fun to drive with less than 200 horsepower, right?
Right. And I feel like if it's a car with less power than that, then you really need a manual to kind of make the most of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, CVTs have also become. I mean, you're saying they've made shift better. Some cars just don't shift at all. They've got those CVTs that just ring out those revs until you need them, and then drop them nice and low for extra fuel economy.
Yeah.
So.
And that's not bad either. Like I don't hate some CVTs. Like there are some good ones out there. But even though automatics are so much faster and more fuel efficient, they will never be as fun. And that is something I will always miss.
So, I mean, there's something that's worth talking about. A long time ago, we had this weird concept from Toyota about this automatic that was like a manual. Do you remember this?
Yeah, you would be able to shift
In automatically.
without a clutch.
Yes.
Is what they were saying.
And I think that very likely could be the future of manuals in automatics.
Yeah, didn't something come out about the mid-engine Corvette that
Having something like that?
Yeah, I think somebody found a patent application that was for like a clutchless manual.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know too much about it, but I thought that would be an interesting idea.
And that's not a new idea. That used to happen. That was something way back a long time ago that was offered, I think, in Saabs, and it didn't work out so well. But I think now the technology is there to allow something like that to be more successful.
It would be interesting. I can't imagine how weird it would be to drive for the first time, like something like that.
So that's the real question. I mean, if we were given no manuals or this weird automatic manual, what would you do? Like, would you still drive like a CVT, or would you drive this weird row at your own automatic?
It's a good question. I think at that point you just give up.
Yeah.
You just take the bus.
Yeah.
There you go, exactly. Get one of those bird scooters or whatever.
Yeah. Or a bicycle. I mean, there's plenty of engagement on a bicycle.
You can change your own
Like
gears on
21
a bike.
speeds.
Yeah. I don't know, that's a good question, and I'm going to think about that. Let's move on, though. So Craig recently was able to drive the new Cadillac XT4.
Ooh.
And I must admit, when the XT4 first debuted at the New York Auto Show, I was really underwhelmed by it. Just because I thought it was very generic, and it had this, like, the plastics they looked really cheap. But after driving it, Craig, what did you think?
I had the exact same reaction you did. 'Cause I missed it at the New York show, but when I saw photos of it, I'm like, come on, what the hell is this? It's so generic, it's so boring. It's just like a scaled down XT5 or something, right? And it's like I was ready to really not like it, but after seeing it in person, I'm like, okay, this is a pretty handsome vehicle. It's nicely proportioned. I think it looks far better in person than the XT5, which is kind of sort of jowly or something. I don't know. It's just.
I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Jowly.
Something odd.
I don't
It's
think
like,
the XT4 is pretty either, but sure, go ahead, man.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not ugly. I just thought it was very generic. And my biggest problem with it was that from a luxury automaker, the plastic cladding that they use, and there's a lot of plastic cladding, it looks like a Tupperware thing.
Yeah, but I thought the interior was really quite nice. It drove a lot better than I expected, looked a lot better than I expected. And it's got a lot of new stuff. Like the architecture is supposedly brand new. Now, automakers, when they say new, you never really know how new that is, right? Because components are shared, or certain hardware gets swapped out and stuff. But they're claiming it's all new, and same with the engine family. It's a new 2-liter turbo 4. It's supposedly a clean sheet design because GM already has a 2-liter turbo, but this is supposedly entirely different, a whole new engine family. And one of the powertrain engineers was telling me that they did that because they've added so much new technology to the engine to increase fuel economy that it was just easier to start from scratch than to try and retrofit all of that to the existing engine family. So it was kind of like interesting.
I guess that makes some sense, yeah. Because GM does have a very good 2-liter turbo in throughout their lineup. I mean, the one that's in the, let's say, the Camaro or the Cadillac ATS is actually not bad at all. But this is not related to that. So that's very interesting. Even
like, I guess the bore and the stroke are different. It's got variable valve lift. It's got an electric water pump and an electric wastegate for the turbo. It's a twin scroll turbo, of course. And they tuned it for torque, interestingly. It's only got 237 horsepower, which, I mean, most other automakers are getting a lot more
out of a 2-liter turbo. Yeah.
Exactly. But they really tuned it to be responsive right off the line, and it is. It thing just scoots. There's like zero lag. You nail it, it just moves, which is nice for everyday driving, you know.
How are the driving dynamics otherwise?
It was fine. I mean, it's another crossover. I don't really think I had much to complain about. There's like there's a base model, and then they fork off. So there's premium luxury, and then there's sport. And the sport models have adjustable dampers, which is kind of nice because I noticed on some of the roads we were testing in the Seattle area, you'd go over bigger imperfections and the body would kind of bounce a little bit when you had it in comfort mode. But if you switched it to sport, it eliminated that without too much of a penalty in ride quality elsewhere. So it really, not much to complain about. It drives, it's very competent and lots of torque off the line. It's got a 9-speed transmission, which unlike the ZF unit that's proliferated throughout the industry, it seems to work pretty well.
Right.
Nice.
How did it feel luxurious enough?
For the segment, yes. It did not feel luxurious, really. But it's, I would say, comparable to the rivals that they're pitting it against, like the XC40 or the Q3 or the X1, that sort of smaller tier of, I guess, premium crossover, you could call it. Because there is some confusion. Does this compete more with like an RDX or an NX? It's sort of a tweener, I think, right? But they're saying it competes with like the X1 and the Q3.
It seems much bigger than those two cars. I think you're right. The NX and the RDX would probably be a better fit for this. And price-wise, I mean, the starting price is pretty attractive, around $36,000. But the one you drove was $54,000, man.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot. But like, if you think about it, what is the average like transaction price in the U.S. today? It's got to be. I think it's more than $36,000 or $35,000. So that's the average. Stuff's expensive. So 55 in that world isn't too crazy, but you could skip some options and get it lower, because 36, like you said, Sami, is a pretty good price, but 55, maybe not so much.
It has a really nice front profile view. You and Ben have taken some really nice photos of this vehicle.
Well, that's all
great.
Ben. That's Ben's.
That looks really good in that front profile, but I don't like any other angle of it. Am I the only one? I don't think it looks that good.
I don't
What do you
hate
think,
it.
Jodi?
I just think it's generic. And there's a difference between something being generic and something being ugly.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, generic is going to age well, right? Like, you see a Volkswagen Passat from like 15 years ago, and you're like, it's not the most exciting car, but you're like, that's still a good-looking car, right? It's not exciting, but it's handsome. And I think this would be the same way. Yeah.
I also wanted to talk to you about the infotainment system.
Yeah.
Is this this is a whole new thing, right? We haven't seen this before?
No more Q.
Unclear. Because, like, they called it Q, but Q was dead, right? So I forgot to actually follow up and ask about that. But it's a really good system. I was blown away. Like, one of the major things I always do when I test an infotainment system is get in and do the pinch to zoom on the map, right? Like, how fast does that respond? And usually it's like,
Yeah,
it's like Blade Runner.
exactly.
But this was instant. It was as good as any smartphone. It was like boom, 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 so fast. And they've also added a little control knob on the center console, so if you've just eaten some fried chicken or whatever, you don't have to get fingerprints all over the screen, which is kind of nice. You get multi ways of interacting with it.
Honestly, me and Jodi were talking about how much we eat fried chicken, and we should get Popeyes to sponsor the podcasts.
I'd be so happy.
Or KFC. I don't really
No,
know.
I'm a Popeyes person.
Well, look, if they're going to sponsor the podcast, I'll eat it. I don't care.
Free food is free food. Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
Sami did something really exciting. He flew over to Spain and drove around the famous Jarama racetrack to drive the new Supra.
Right. So the Toyota Supra is a really highly anticipated vehicle. I think that would be an understatement, actually. People have been hearing about this for like what feels like 4 years, that a Supra is coming. And in what form? Well, I finally got to see it. It's definitely a car. It's definitely real. It's pretty quick. But here's the thing. Everyone's going to want to bring up the fact that it's related to a BMW product. That product in particular is the Z4. Not just related, it essentially is a BMW Z4, but with a roof. All of the hardware in this vehicle is supplied by BMW. Just Toyota took it all and said, we're going to take all that hardware and turn it into this item. And they said that it's going to feel different than the Z4, Obviously, the fact that one is a convertible and one is a coupe makes it pretty obvious that they're two automakers are going in different directions for how their cars should react.
So just to be clear, Sam, that's actually one of the questions I had for you. What each automaker is like contributing. So BMW did like the whole platform and everything?
From what I understand, everything.
Wow.
They said all the hardware is BMW. Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify, Sammy went to Spain and he drove a prototype version of the Supra.
Right.
So it was all camoed up.
Inside and out.
Inside and out. You
Right.
were not given any specs.
Zero specs, zero numbers. Everything they told us was really vague and general. They said it will make at least 300 horsepower. It will weigh under 3,300 pounds.
Didn't they say like 300 to 400? Like that's a pretty big range.
Yeah. And it will, there was one more thing. It will be faster to 60 than 6 seconds. And I'm like, anything is faster
My
than
Golf
6.
can do that.
So
They're totally doing a Mustang with this, right? Like that's what Ford did when the new Mustang was coming out. Like they had all these little press events where you'd learn about the wheels or the powertrain, and they wanted their hit in the news cycle constantly. And it seems like Toyota's doing the same thing.
Well, I think you're right. I think they do want their hit in the news cycle, but I also believe that they're actually taking every bit of feedback so personally and so and they want to change each thing before it finally hits the road, because I don't think this car is coming this year. I also don't know when. I don't know if it's coming next year even.
Really?
I think it could be sometime, maybe next year, maybe late next year.
Isn't it supposed to be a 2020?
Yeah. What, like halfway through next year? Yeah, that's about a year away.
I thought it was going to debut like a production model, was supposed to debut in early 2019 and would be on sale later that year as a 2020.
I'm looking at this car and it's still a prototype. They're still afraid to show us the interior of it.
Right.
If they're going to show us a vehicle in early 2019, that's 2 months away. You think they'd have figured out what the interior would look like?
I think they already know, but maybe they're keeping it hidden because A, they want to make changes.
Yeah.
And then they want to keep it a secret because they have to keep the excitement up.
I think they're trying to hone in on each part individually, and I think this experience that I was at was to iron out the driving feel of the vehicle. And honestly, this is a sports car. This is a true sports car, except for one glaring omission. We'll talk about that in a second. First thing we did, we took it on the track. I got to learn a whole new racetrack. It's a really nice racetrack with lots of sweeping turns, lots of tight turns, and lots of elevation as well. The first thing I noticed with the Supra is visibility was really good, and that's something that I don't think gets enough coverage when it comes to talking about sports cars, because some are so obnoxiously designed that you can't see anything, you can't look into a corner because of just how, we've all driven Camaros here, and as great as a Camaro is to drive, it's terrible to actually drive because you can't see anything.
I was going to say the Lamborghini where you had to look right into
and
the headlight.
I had to constantly be like looking around. And the Supra didn't have that. The car really, and then each lap as it picked up the speed, the car really gets out of the way. It wants you to drive the track as if the car isn't there, which is a feature that really describes the Cayman and the Boxster, in my opinion. Those are cars that disappear and let you experience the road the way it was intended to be driven. And this car started to feel a lot like that.
That is so interesting to me, that it feels like, you said a front engine 718.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were a couple things. It didn't sound like anything. That's mainly because the European regulations for exhaust and emissions and noise are quite strict. And they say that for sure the American models will be louder, and they might actually have a little bit more power as a result too. So I also noticed that it has 2 drive modes, a normal mode and a sport mode, which is very good because I think a couple of weeks ago we were talking about the BMW M5 and it had 3 settings for every single function of the car, and that's obnoxious. This just has normal and sport, and that's great. And
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and there's a real distinct 2 personality to the vehicle. The normal mode, very easy to get along with. The sport mode was far more precise. It was proactive with its gear changes. And the way the car reacted to each of your changes in direction was fantastic. I was really impressed by that.
One
Cool,
question
so
I
there's
had,
like a
Sammy,
certain-
I read your story. Great job, by the way. And one line you said, on the track, the Supra, it disappears in your hands. like you were saying, like a Porsche. Is the steering, would you say, like better than a Giulia Quadrifoglio? Because for me, at least, that's like that car has like the best steering, I think, of anything I've driven. It's just so dialed in.
I would love to be able to say that, but I know that on the variety of roads that I've driven the Giulia on, I remember it feeling very lively. In fact, actually, the steering in the Alfa Romeo, and unfortunately, the roads that I drove were like perfect
Right.
roads. And there was a little bit of, actually quite a bit of feedback, but I want to see them in the roads that I'm more familiar with, and that would allow me to really judge just how good the steering is. But based on what I saw, it's at least better than any of BMW's previous steering efforts. So I'm really happy with that.
That says a lot.
Yes, recent steering.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was interested to know if you felt like it was a pure sports car, like it had that like raw purity that we're always talking about as automotive journalists.
Right. The only thing lacking is a lack of manual transmission.
Right.
I really wished it had a manual transmission. I think everyone, as we just said, a manual transmission is a true must when you're making an enthusiast car.
It wouldn't make it on your list, Jody. It couldn't be the 8th car.
I wish it was, but I don't think it'll happen.
I know.
And there's one more bit to it. I mean, a true sports car does not necessarily mean it's a true track car, too.
True.
So driving it on the road was far more fun than driving it on the track. The car really came alive. It could really close distances. You can realize just how quickly it can make distances just shorten up. And it had so much grip, and the chassis was so well tuned that every time you change direction, it was instant. I loved it. One of the funnier things about this event was there were only 4 prototypes that we could drive, but there were 8 journalists. And each of the cars had to be driven with a chaperone, a Toyota engineer or employee. So what are the other 4 journalists doing? They're doing something that arguably might be more fun than driving the Supra. They are chasing the Supras down in GT86s. And I think that's first of all, when I saw that happen, I said this actually might be a mistake, because I think the GT86 is one of Toyota's strongest efforts in the past 2 years. It has great steering, it has an amazing manual transmission, and it really feels like alive on the road. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it's slow and has no grip. 2 things that the Supra definitely has. So we caught up we stuck together in most situations, but as soon as many tight turns got together, then the Supra started peeling away, and then when the straights happened, whoever was driving the Supra was like, I'm sick and tired of seeing that GT86 in my rearview mirror. Boom, gone. So it was one very fun to drive the GT86 at 10/10 trying to keep up with the Supra, but also could get very tiring.
Right.
Because you honestly have to be awake, and doing that on the public roads can be sketchy at times.
With jet lag.
Yeah, not to mention the jet lag. The Supra was far easier to drive at that speed, at that level, without having to worry about what type of grip it has, whether or not it'll understeer, which is something that the 86 actually can do. It can understeer in some situations. And the Supra did not feel like that at all. It was far more compliant, easier to drive fast, and it's truly a true sports car. I can't wait to find out what the price is of this car.
Right. What would be the sweet spot for you?
It has to be at that, it has to start at that 40,000 mark that we were talking about earlier today.
Right.
40 to 50, I think, would be perfect. Anything lower than that would be a gift. Would honestly be a gift from Toyota.
Would it compete with like a Camaro SS, Mustang GT, or is this going to be more Z4 like, or something higher end?
I don't know. Based on the interior that I saw, again, all of the buttons and knobs and controls in this car, the ones that we interacted with, are all BMW spec, man. Like the HVAC controls look that same, the knob.
Yeah.
Even the writing, it looks just like that. The turn signals, a BMW turn signal when you use it. It's this weird rhomboid thing. And you're like, that's not a Toyota turn signal.
Right.
So if it is featuring BMW-esque quality, it might be more expensive, like a Z4. But personally, the drive experience is more akin to what I've seen in a Camaro SS or a Mustang GT, just with a straight 6 instead of a V8, and it felt more lively and lighter as a result of that.
Yeah.
Cool.
They're like the odd couple, right? Because like BMW is cutting edge technology, like the ultimate driving machine and like prestige, but then Toyota's very like blue collar, low maintenance, super reliable. Like they're in two different worlds, right? It's kind of odd that they partnered up.
And this is something that's actually triggered a lot of people saying, I will never buy a Toyota made by BMW. Like, what's the point? And I'm not sure how to react to those mannerisms. I think if a car drives well, it doesn't matter who makes it. If it drives well, and we should love it. I don't care what it's called. If it's a Supra, I don't care. If it drives well, it's good. A lot of people are triggered by the fact that this is called a Supra when it has very little in common with previous Supras. All old Supras were a 2+2.
Yeah.
They're kind of grand touring cars in a way too, or Japanese muscle cars, not cutting razor sharp sports cars.
People will complain about anything though.
I guess listen to us.
I know, like we complain about it not having a manual transmission. It's the same thing, right? Like enthusiasts usually have a hard line and they won't stray from that line. But I'm still really excited about this car. Like even though there was so much hype surrounding it, now that I hear your driving impressions, I feel like it'll live up to that hype.
If they do not nail the packaging of this car, it could fall flat really badly.
Right.
And we've seen that happen actually with Acura and the NSX. This car was very expensive.
True.
And a lot of people said, not for that much money. It's not worth it. And on the other hand, the GTR, which is a car that costs $100,000. I mean, I don't think the Supra is not going to be like that. But the fact that it cost so much and performed so well for that price point, it gained a fan base that is loyal to this day, despite the GTR not having significant changes or upgrades since it debuted nearly 10 years ago.
Right.
And I think that would make for a really good segue into something that you've driven recently, Craig.
Oh yes.
A Nissan
Brand
GTR.
new Nissan Altima.
Oh, Nissan Altima.
Not quite as
Okay.
exciting as the
Not
GTR.
as exciting. So tell me about the Nissan Altima, because there are some exciting elements to it. I want you to hit the two very interesting things that will make the Altima stand out this year in ways that I don't think it's ever stood out before.
So the big one is, I think, you can get it with all-wheel drive, which really, I think, only two other competitors offer, which would be the Subaru Legacy and the Ford Fusion, which is, half of those are probably going away shortly.
It's true.
And in Canada, I believe the car is all-wheel drive only, which makes a lot of sense. Also, you can get the Infinity variable compression turbocharged engine in the Altima. That's the V6 replacement, which
Right,
is
that's a
an
great
awesome
engine,
little
too.
power plant. Really enjoyed it in the Altima.
How did you find the transmission?
It's a CVT across the board, and as CVTs go, it's fine. I've made my peace with CVTs. I mean, I'm accustomed to them now, and they've been improved a lot since when they really first hit the market. And Nissans are pretty good. They will simulate gear changes under heavy acceleration, so you don't get that constant droning. That's so annoying with a CVT. But I mean, CVTs are all about maximizing fuel economy and performance, right? That's what they're there for, because they can keep the engine right where it needs to be, the right RPM range.
And that's what's important about that variable compression turbo as well. You've got a CVT paired to that. You're trying to get really good performance, really good fuel economy as well. Did you drive both the all-wheel drive and the variable compression motors?
No, unfortunately, I only got to spend time in the turbocharged model, which, by the way, is seriously fast. It's got a big swell of torque starting at like 3,500 RPM, and it just rockets you down the road up to 5,500 and beyond, because it peaks at 280 pound-feet of torque, which is kind of a lot, I think, to be sending through a CVT, which aren't generally known, for being the most durable transmission design. So we'll see how that goes down the road, but.
Interesting. So first impressions, do you think it is better than the Camry or the Accord?
That's a very good question, Jodi. I do not think it is better than the Accord or the Mazda 6. I think it's pretty comparable to the Camry, and probably better than like a Fusion, a Malibu, or a Sonata. So it's right in the hunt, with the midsize segment. It's got some issues that I didn't care for, but it's also, there's a lot going for it. I think it looks really sharp. Some people may not love that plunging grille, but I think they did it in a tasteful way. It's aggressive and bold, but it's still a handsome car. unlike the Camry, which is like...
Yeah,
There's a lot of angles going on.
absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
And the interior is roomy. The back seat has a lot of space. The front seats are comfortable. The trunk is large. It's easy to see out of. They've lowered the cowl by, I think, up to 2 inches because the engines are lower, so they could get better forward visibility.
Okay, you said you had some complaints about it. What were those?
The complaints are about the interior, really. The interior design is very nice. It's again, a straightforward sort of horizontal look, and it's very cleanly styled. But some of the materials aren't very great, and it's just not very sturdy. I was poking around the cabin, and the trim on the dashboard where the climate control mounts, if you push on it, the whole thing kind of was moving. The headliner up where the sunroof was, it was like at the front edge, it wasn't supported at all, so you can very easily just flex it downward. It's like blatant cost cutting. And like the rear door panels, like, were very similar to the headliner. They're just kind of floppy and not very well attached, which is not what you want.
It's very necessary in one of these cars because, you know, these family sedans go like 10 years or more before being taken off the road, and hundreds of thousands of miles on them. They need to be robust, durable vehicles, and if they're flexing already at this point, it does not bode well for a long-term future, right?
Exactly.
That's not a good
and
look.
to be fair, it could be like a prototype model or prototype models that they had, but the car's going on sale in like a couple weeks. And I've got to think they're not really going to be reinforcing the headliner up near the sunroof, right?
It's just a bad look because if you remember like the Accord or the Mazda 6, like everything, the interiors are some of the nicest parts of those cars. And like that's where
Mazda
you
6
spend
is
all your
amazing.
time.
Yep.
Yeah, so to have a wonky interior is not a good look for them. That's too bad.
Right.
But other than that, the car drives as you'd expect. I think it drives a little better than a Camry, but not quite as well as the Mazda 6 or the Accord. The engine sounds good, actually, I thought. It's kind of loud under heavy acceleration, the Turbo 4, but it's sort of a good sound, right? So many of today's cars are super quiet, right? To hear a little bit of engine is nice. And yeah, what was that, Sammy?
Nothing. I was thinking. I wanted to hear more about your impressions of the front seats. One of the things that Nissan is well known for is having these really supportive front seats. They're called like space seats. What are they called?
Oh, the NASA.
Zero gravity.
Zero gravity seats.
Yeah.
Are these still available on the Altima, or have they been tweaked? Have they been improved?
They still, I don't know if they've been improved, but they're still called zero gravity, and they are indeed extremely comfortable. I mean, we spent all day shooting the car, 12, 13, 14 hours, I forget how long it was, and no fatigue issues whatsoever. The car also comes with, while I'm thinking about it, the fatigue brought this to mind, Pro Pilot Assist. Have either of you guys experienced that yet?
Yes.
Yes.
It's
I've used
freaking
it
amazing.
in the QX50, and
I've
it's
had
really
it-
good.
I've had it in the QX50 and the Nissan Leaf. What do you think about it?
I think it's great. I mean, it's Nissan's next generation adaptive cruise, right? So it's going to vary the vehicle speed based on traffic. It'll slow down and stop as required, but it keeps you centered in the lane. That's the big thing they've added. So you don't have to put as many steering inputs in. You can't take your hands off the wheel. It's not like Cadillac Super Cruise, right, where you can just sit there with your arms crossed.
Which is which is the natural position of anybody who's not got their hands on the wheel. Like,
Yeah, I'm not doing anything. But I thought it worked amazingly well on the long drive back from the location we were shooting at to the hotel. It was just, I put the cruise on, I engaged the Pro Pilot system, and I didn't have to think about it, really. Just the car kind of did the rest. And to compare, the fact that we can compare an Altima to like a Cadillac CT6, which starts at what, $80,000 or something when you get the Super Cruise, that's pretty good for Nissan, right?
right?
Yeah, and it's probably, the Pro Pilot is probably one of my favorite of these systems out there. I feel like
Right.
it's really smooth in how it works. It's intuitive. It doesn't leave too much space between you and the person in front, so people
Right.
can't just like cut you off all the time.
And although when you turn it on, it kind of like locks in that lane, and it feels quite like sturdy. I'm taking control now. But when you do apply some wheel torque, it doesn't like
Fight you.
It doesn't fight you. I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
It's funny, like, I was in a Lexus GSF a week or two before and took it on that road trip down to Ohio, and the adaptive cruise in that car sucked. It was like, it wouldn't maintain the speed you said. It was always like 1 or 2 miles an hour slower. especially if there was like a hill, it wouldn't do it. And then like if you were behind
In a
a car,
GSF?
yeah, it was just like, it was so like conservative, it like wouldn't do anything. So like you'd be behind a car that was going slower than you. Let's say you have your cruise set at 70 miles an hour and this car's doing 65, and that car changes lanes to move over. It would take the GSF forever, ever to like re-accelerate to 70 that you had set. It was so slow as adaptive cruise systems go. Lovely car to drive otherwise, but man, ProPilot is way better.
Right.
Wow.
Which is
That's impressive.
impressive to say because the Nissan is a mainstream brand, while a Lexus is supposed to be a luxury brand.
Yeah.
You'd think it'd be the other way around.
Yeah. So the Altima, though, so the turbo engine is replacing the V6. It's got 48 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, but that's the top-level engine. They've also reworked the base engine, which is a 2.5-liter four-cylinder. It's naturally aspirated, which is what they've had in the car for a number of years now, which I've, truth be told, never liked. That
It was
engine
really
is like-
serviceable, if I remember correctly.
Say again?
It was just serviceable.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of gritty feeling. It just not pleasant to drive. But they're claiming the new 2.5 in the Altima is like 80% new. It's more efficient, supposedly smoother, and more powerful. So I think it's got 188 horsepower and 180 torques. So it should be a very nice base engine. And that's the only engine you can get the all-wheel drive system with, which is kind of odd. You'd think they would offer that with the one that has 280 pound-feet of torque. But they don't, because they want to keep the price down, which is good for them.
That is worth bringing up because the competition that you mentioned before, the Fusion and the Legacy. Now the Legacy you can get with that flat six. It comes with all-wheel drive no matter what. You can get it with that flat six, the more expensive model, and the Fusion Sport is the one that I was thinking of with all-wheel drive. Can you get a regular non-sport Fusion with all-wheel drive?
As years ago, you could get the 2-liter Turbo 4 with all-wheel drive, and I'm pretty sure you still can.
But you can't get the 1.5 with it.
I don't think so.
No, I think it was only the 2-liter 4.
So Nissan is filling in that gap at the bottom end of the range if you want a new car with. And I mean, I don't mean to throw too much shade on Subaru because the Legacy is quite old feeling. And even when you get it with that 2.5 in all-wheel drive, it just doesn't, it's not a great purchase
Right.
in my opinion.
But this is another option for people who want a sedan like that and don't want a Subaru because right now they're the only like legit other player with all-wheel drive. So this is a nice choice.
It's a good option for Nissan to have in their lineup. And overall, it's a very nice car. I mean, but that's a lot of cars these days, right? A lot of them you can't complain about. And this is, like I said in my review, it's right in the hunt with the other models. It's not my favorite, but it's by no means near the bottom of the list either. So it should be a good addition to their lineup.
Well, to me, I think the most important part is having something that will take it away from its competition. The Camry and the Accord do not have all-wheel drive. It's even especially not at the base level engine. And having something like that will help. And then having something different at the top end, which is that VC turbo, will also allow you to steal a little bit from your competition. It's something distinctly different from the rest of the competition that'll catch people's attention.
Oh yeah, and that engine is a real sweetheart. And you guys have driven it in the Infinity, right? You liked it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
It was a little loud, I found, but if you're saying that the new Altima, they've elaborated the way it sounds, it might sound pretty good.
I hope they did.
It might sound the same, actually. I don't know that they specifically made the Altima louder, but I did notice the noise that it made, and I kind of liked it.
I think it's okay for it to be louder in an Altima because it's not a luxury car. So in the Infinity, it bothered me with the CVT because it was so noisy.
Yeah.
And if I want a luxury SUV, I want it to be quiet. And it just didn't come across as very luxurious to have that noise. But I wouldn't be so bothered in an Altima.
And that engine, it's kind of interesting. There's so much technology in there. When you look at like the cutaway of how it all works, it's like, how the hell did you think of that? It's ingenious because it's varying the compression ratio from, I think it was 8-to-1 to 14-to-1. And the engine also has port and direct fuel injection, which Toyota has done for a long time now. But it can use the direct injection for high compression, and there won't be any engine knock or any spark knock. And that's for high fuel economy, but then it can lower the compression ratio and use the port injectors for more power, believe it or not, which is kind of interesting. So it gives them the best of fuel for whatever situation that you're driving in, right? It's
I'm glad to see
very
them
clever.
refining it because it does seem like next level stuff.
Yeah, nobody's got anything like this. Now, it does make the car more efficient, but is it worth the cost, right? Because there's a lot of stuff going on in there.
How much will
Apparently.
this thing cost? Do you know yet?
Oh, shoot. What was the base price? I want to say like around 26, somewhere in there. And we tested it at a little less than, I want to say 35 for a platinum model. Yeah. So it's right there, with the rivals.
Nice. Cool. Anything else you want to add about the Altima?
I don't think so. We covered the CVT. It drives well. Oh, they did one interesting thing with the suspension. It has monotube rear shocks. Whoopee. At the back. But they also do something, I forget what they call it. It's like, I forget the name of it, but what it does over larger bumps in the road, it will use the rear brakes a little bit to keep the back end from bouncing, which is kind of clever. I don't know if they use that in other things or not.
I notice that rear wobble, that excessive vertical motion in vehicles way too often sometimes when you're hitting some bumps, like consecutive bumps. And I feel like if I had passenger in the back of the seat, maybe it would change just how much that would move, but I would always also think that could get people seasick. But having a feature that helps mitigate that is pretty impressive, although maybe not at the cost of rear brakes, but hey, we've got to start somewhere.
Yeah. But it's
Cool,
clever
thank you so
stuff.
much,
It's a nice
Craig.
car.
And
Well.
we'll have a video of that as well. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of fun you guys got up to there. But that is it for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Craig, for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me. This is tons of fun. I hope the audience thinks so as well, but we'll find out in the comments.
They love you.
Absolutely, and I wanted to say that if you have any questions for us, feel free to send us a question either on the YouTube channel or send it again, tips@AutoGuide.com. We also would recommend you hearing some of our previous episodes. You can see them on our YouTube channel, or if you subscribe to our podcast on any of your favorite podcast clients like Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Music and Apple iTunes, as well as Pocket Casts, you can comment and find a way to get in touch with us through there as well. Next week is a very important week for both Jodi and Craig. They will be out in Paris covering the Paris Motor Show, and they will be doing a hopefully live, walk around, depending on just how severe the time difference is and when these
And the
things-
French Wi-Fi, notoriously bad.
We'll also, it's something worth mentioning. You should stay tuned for that. It's always fun to see how these people react live to your favorite cars of the show. And there's some pretty interesting things showing up. Some new Mercedes models, some new BMWs, maybe a new Bugatti we've been hearing about.
Apparently
I'm
a
not sure.
four-door.
We'll see that. So, stay tuned to the YouTube channel next week, as well as our Facebook page. And as always, you can come back to AutoGuide.com, read our latest reviews, features, and news stories, as well as some of our even product suggestions over there as well.
What was that website again, Sammy, please?
That's AutoGuide.com. Yeah, I think you'll like some of the stuff out there. There's this one guy, Craig Cole, very funny.
Oh, stop. That's bad.
Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.